Fantastic. Well, it's officially 10 a.m. So shall we get started, folks? Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to our latest webinar, which is titled Cross-Agency Collaboration, Why It Benefits Businesses and How to Make Your Supply Networks Work Better for You. My name is James Brown. I'm your host for today. We've got a super informative panel discussion coming up today, and I'm joined by two very special guests who we'll introduce in a moment. But before we dive into our topic, I'd just like to kick things off with a couple of housekeeping pointers. We've got time for Q&A at the end of the session, so any questions you guys have for us, please pop in the chat or use the Q&A function, and we'll get those answered at the end of the panel discussion. We'll also be sharing a recording of this webinar in the coming weeks, so look out for that in your inboxes once it's live on our websites. So that's the housekeeping rules done. Let's get started. To quickly introduce myself, my name is James Brown, and I'm head of commercial at Comtec Translations. We're a language, localization, and translation agency who've been around for 40 years, based in the UK, and we specialize in supporting international brands and their agencies communicate with their audiences in 250 different languages and thrive internationally. I'm also delighted to be joined by two very special guest panelists today. First of all, please everyone give a warm welcome to Jen Swain from Coda. Jen, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and Coda?
Of course, yeah. Thank you, James, and good morning, everybody. I'm Jen Swain. I'm CEO at Coda. We're industrial marketing experts for a world made better. So we're a marketing communications agency working with the global leaders in manufacturing, scientific and industrial technologies. And they're the people who are making a sustainable future possible for all of us. I feel like there's so much progress in technology, efficiency and sustainability happening in specifically the industrial and manufacturing sectors where we work. So I'm personally on a bit of a mission to be a champion for industrial manufacturing and the process industries. And it's great to be here this morning.
Thank you so much, Jen. All sounds fantastic, and yeah, pleasure for you having you on the call with us today. And secondly, please give another warm welcome to Chris King of Wildfire. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Wildfire?
Sure. Thanks, James, and hello, everyone. So I am Managing Director of Wildfire. Wildfire is a tech PR agency at its core, similar to Coda. We've been around since the late 80s, always kind of focused on the technology sector as our specialism. So we began as a PR agency and were born that way. Over time, we have evolved into more integrated marketing services and things like that. So in my role as MD and before that, I have always focused on agency partnerships, which are essential to the kind of delivery of our client work. So I'm very relevant to the topic today in terms of kind of working with lots of agencies in the PR space, but also in other service areas like translation and video and digital and things like that. So yeah, lots of experience, good and bad, of collaborating with agencies that I'll be pleased to share today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. And yes, we are here to talk about the good today. And you touched on the perfect introduction to our topic as well today, all around collaboration, which is why the three of us are here today. So as you probably gathered from the introductions, Coda, Wildfire and Comtec, we're all very different agencies with very different specialisms. But whether that's translation, localization, marketing, PR, websites, there's so much difference that we're all really strong in. We all work individually, as I'm sure lots of you do today, with different global brands and also in partnership with other agencies. But what's brought us together is we often collaborate working with together for the same global clients. And it's working with one particular brand. Through this partnership, we really identified that both from an agency perspective and also from the client side of things, when individual agencies work together in service of the same client and bring their specialisms together, we all thrive and everyone succeeds much better than working in a siloed manner. For example, we've been able to, for our cross-agency collaborative approach, address some of the pain points our clients are experiencing much stronger and deliver a great more deal of value than we would have if we were working in a very separate manner. We all felt that this partnership we've developed together is worth talking about, and we've all had a great experience and we find it really refreshing and beneficial. So we wanted to share this best practice with others, which is what brings us all here today. for this panel discussion. So if you're a global brand in attendance who are looking to potentially bring their individual agencies together, or are interested in outsourcing to an agency, or likewise, if you're an agency who is looking to work better with your fellow agencies in service of the same customer, or you're looking for that perfect partner from another agency, this is a panel discussion for you. And I'm really excited to interview Jen and Chris this morning and dig in and get their insights on this great topic. So shall we get started, Jen and Chris?
Let's do it.
Go on, let's do it.
Perfect. So I've got the role of moderator this morning, and I've got a series of questions I'm going to ask you both to get your perspective. So my first question, as mentioned, we've worked together for quite a while now in service of the same customer, and we've all had similar agency partnerships, as Chris touched upon in the past, some good, some bad. First question then, what are the benefits, in your opinions, of global brands collaborating with multiple specialist agencies as opposed to one partnership with a more generic agency handling all the requirements?
You want to take that? You want to start, Jen, or shall I?
Go for it. You go for it.
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, Jay, I think the kind of key word there that you used in the question is kind of specialism. I think, I don't care what agency is, whether it's, some of the biggest and well-known out there, they've all got strengths and weaknesses. And from the client's perspective, if you have a broad brief with many different elements of a service and things like that, then, there will be things they're good at and there will be weak links that could undoubtedly be plugged by a quality agency that is dedicated and focused on their skills in that space. So, I think it's all about quality and bringing together the right people for the right job in the right way to deliver the best overall outcome for kind of you as a client.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. I think one of the other things that I think we've benefited from, particularly in this circumstance that we're talking about, where the three of us have been working together, is that real transparency of what each party is bringing to the table, and that value that we're adding for the client, not only through the collaboration but also focusing on our own separate parts to sort of bring the whole thing together. So yeah, that feels really important.
I completely agree with you both on that. I think the transparency point of view is really, really, really important. And I think since we started working with this particular customer, the three of us have been quite a nice unit. We've worked collaboratively with both of your teams as well. I know my team have worked with your team, Jen, your team, Chris. We've been very open and transparent from the kind of start, looking at how we can make things work better across all the different work streams. And from our perspective, from a translation, having insights from yourselves who are really in charge of the marketing strategy, the technical setup and workflow, it helps us succeed in our job much, much better. So I think that's really adding value. I think all about transparency and partnership. And learning from each other as well. I think that's something we've also really benefited from. I don't know how you guys have felt with the kind of learning perspective. I know you've kind of been in lots of meetings together, and you've been able to share things, different insights.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it all comes down to have the right partnership, of course. But I think, very much kind of, when it's working well, you're kind of filling in each other's blind spots. And there's been kind of many conversations and about specific kind of service delivery points over the time that we've been working together, where kind of either Jen and myself or one of our teams have been collaborating around a various point. And, we've got our way of thinking in terms of what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do. And then, that different perspective of just challenges you to kind of think about it in a different way and come together for, the mutual best outcome for both of us, rather than belligerently making life difficult for one or the other, which isn't in the client's best interest at the end of the day.
No.
Agree. I think there's something really interesting in the power dynamic and how that changes when there are a group of agencies working together with a client.
Yeah.
Very often agencies are made of people pleasers usually, and that power dynamic usually. So I think where we've been able to look out for each other in the process along the way, I think that's been really beneficial. We talked about an example where actually we've been able to kind of also help push the client along for the benefit of the work that Chris's team has been doing, because we kind of need that stuff to happen, but the client's sort of been a little bit slow to come back. So where we can kind of gather our power to sort of be more of an equal to that client, because we've got shared power together. I think that's quite important too.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of that message of, we're not going to be able to achieve this goal by this date because you're not approving things quick enough, or whatever the kind of pain point is. Hearing that from multiple sources consistently is much more powerful than one agency doing it alone.
Absolutely. And the fact that we're all coming together to kind of share that message shows that we're doing it because we care and we want everyone to succeed in the process. So I think that's what's really come across as well when working with you both in service to this particular customer. So fantastic. One thing I'd also like to ask your guys' opinion on is what are the benefits of bringing agencies together for collaboration in terms of briefings and quarterly reviews, which is something we've all experienced as part of this process? What are your thoughts there?
Shall I jump in here, Chris?
Yeah, you go, Jem.
Yeah, I think this is feels quite radical for a lot of agencies.
Yeah.
The concept of, you know what, let's share more information, let's get on the same page. And because often we think about each other as competitors, but actually in this scenario that we're talking about, in agency partnership and collaboration, we are all meant to be working towards the same goals for the client. And yes, maybe we're all inputting different skill sets and different value, but actually, if we can get aligned on what we're all trying to do, that's really powerful. So I think that's really the key thing for me, sharing things like goals, KPIs, how we're being measured, and what we should be working on to get towards those goals, whether it's within one agency or across the piece. That's really important. So yeah, for me, a really big part of it is about being on the same page and pushing in the same direction.
Yeah, and I think it's around that kind of consistency and
yeah,
I mean, we've all got to remember that the kind of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think clients want agencies that make life easy for them, not make life difficult for them. I mean, in the sense of the delivery, it's fine to be, as a consultant, to ask challenging questions and push them to think in a different way. But in terms of just actually getting the job done, they want it to work smoothly. And the best way to do that is, as Jen says, for everyone to be on the same page for that kind of togetherness. And I think everybody learns from each other in different ways through the kind of osmosis of being together. So I think having a more formal approach to it is really helpful for everybody.
Yeah,
I think that kind of learning point is really key, because it's really hard for a client to deliver the same information consistently across multiple different agency partners, and for that to still be joined up. So actually, bringing that together. I've certainly been on calls with Chris's team, workshops about branding, where I've been privy to information that perhaps we wouldn't have heard as another agency partner. So that's improved the quality and I suppose the perspective that we've got about the work that we're doing. So yeah, there's loads of value in that collaboration piece.
I completely agree. I just want to throw my 2 cents in there on this question, because as translation localization, we're usually at the very end of a process after the work that your teams will have done, and it's with some partners we don't get the things we ask for in terms of all the insights, all the KPIs. We know what it's so useful for us to know what we're working towards, because we also have a kind of stake in the game as well, and we're taking the work that you guys have done on perhaps the core market and your strategy, and essentially amplifying that across all the other markets. So these insights, which are often forgotten when it comes to localization, despite us asking for them, some agencies or clients in the past will be like, oh, I don't really know. They don't really understand why we'd want to know these things. But it's really refreshing to get the information because it helps us perform better. Style and tone as well. I know you touched on the kind of branding workshops you've been in. Us knowing that kind of stuff, again, is so helpful, because our job is to essentially keep the global brand voice, but also those little things that we need to tailor for the respective markets to be culturally appropriate. So yeah, it's been really nice having access to all this information that we often don't get given. So it's really helpful for us as well to ensure we're doing a good job as well as part of the process. Awesome. So I think actually we've come on to our next question really, really nicely. So when there's multiple specialist agencies working with the same end customer, how can the agency set up behind the scenes to make sure that everyone is supporting each other really well? and helping each other achieve their mutual goals? What are a couple of things that agencies can be doing?
Do you want to start, Jim?
I'm happy to, if you are happy for me to. Yeah, I've got quite an interesting take on this, I think. In that, at the very, very beginning of this, the relationship we started with this client, Chris and I had a really good conversation actually about kind of what are our kind of commercial goals from this. And I think that's actually a really healthy place to be having a conversation to start with. And actually, I feel as though, just saying this out loud, I've not said this to you guys before, but actually I think we could probably do more in terms of sharing what our vision is as the agency partner to do the work for that client, the following year. We're coming up to budget planning, I'm certain, for 2025 with this particular client we're talking about. Actually, I think there'd be real power in us getting together and saying, okay, what are we all looking to achieve from this relationship for our own agencies for the next year, and how do we pull that together in a way that makes sense to our client, that we could possibly even present as a single unit. I think that would be really powerful. So I think there's some behind the scenes work that we could do there to make sure that we're each feeling as though we are working together and for each other, and making sure we get opportunities that are right for each of us, as opposed to setting it up once and then we kind of all go and do our own thing. So yeah, I don't know, I think that's a potential for the future in terms of how this could develop.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think, yeah, in terms of just some of those metrics, as Jen said, that first call between us as the kind of leaders of the business for that kind of financial conversation. But I think at a kind of day-to-day account handling perspective, I think, we very quickly set up a weekly call and I think this might not necessarily work in all situations, but I think, given the kind of nature of the vast scope of work that we were dealing with and kind of the way we kind of came together as well, there are so many different moving parts that each of us are individually accountable for in terms of our scopes of work, but that impact the other massively if we, go in the wrong direction or don't kind of listen to each other, and kind of what the knock-on effect of what we do to something further down the demand gen kind of process. So I think, having that understanding and that kind of dialogue at the, with the people doing the job has been hugely helpful. And I think, for the client's benefit as well, one of the things we did early, which is kind of why we're all here today as well, James, is kind of look at those economies of scale and where we were both going to be having a need for translation. It's like, well, rather than go off individually with partners that we may or may not know or have worked with before or something like that, it's like, let's pool our resources, pull the kind of spending power, get the client a better deal, get us all a kind of better deal, and kind of that consistency and quality of output as a result as well, rather than having various people all kind of muddling away on their own doing different things. It's like, bring it together and make it consistent.
Yeah, I think also we've kind of through the fact that we've shared so well and so frequently and kind of kept each other up to speed along the journey, we're almost kind of creating a bit of a hive mind about this client. So in a way, we're making this partnership a bit indispensable. It's kind of like, well, why would you choose to make any changes here? We've set this up so that we've created this really strong network of people who are bought into getting you, client, to where you want to get to in terms of your goals. And I think, that's a big part of it too.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that what the kind of consistent thread we've been talking about last 20 minutes is all around collaboration and communication as well. I think from our perspective, I'd met both of you. I met you, Jen, at a networking event before we coincidentally ended up working together, and I know Chris, my colleague Emma, had met you and your team several times as well through a similar kind of community. I think from day one, we had very strategic conversations around the workflow, how to get it all set up for success. And those have continued, whether it's through regular catch-up calls, individually or together as a three, but also with your teams as well, and my team working together and kind of regular updates, that sort of thing. So I think that's been really strong for me, keeping that communication flowing constantly. It's been a really good, really important takeaway. And that's helped avoid the siloedness, I think. It's been just every idea sharing back and forth. So yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Next question then. So can you guys provide an example potentially of a situation where perhaps both of you have worked together to alleviate a pain point the client may have?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick this one up. I guess the one thing that we've not done super clearly is kind of explain the bits of the, I guess, the pie that we're all working with. James, relatively straightforward and obvious for yourself and Comtec, but in terms of the relationship between Wildfire and Coda, so the way that that's been working with this particular client, we're talking about Chris and his team have been leading on a website redesign and also a branding and positioning piece for the client. And we have been working on kind of keeping their marketing delivery ticking and running. So we're sort of the extended marketing team for them. And then Chris and his team have been doing some of the technical website stuff and some of the big thinking. So I guess from that point of view, something where I think we worked together brilliantly was we have an industrial and manufacturing specialism at Coda, and we've been in that space for the last 15, 16 years. So we know it really well. And that means that certain things like pictures of chimney smokestacks can be a bit of a turn off for some clients. And yes, particularly when you're going through branding exercises. So that sort of sector specific knowledge, we were able to kind of feed into that branding and positioning process for Chris and his team, which I think kind of led to a better outcome in terms of we actually had an opportunity to really push the client to be quite creative, which again, in the industrial manufacturing space is quite a rare thing, quite a rare opportunity. But I think we were able to sort of provide some of that sector specific knowledge so that Chris and his team could run through their processes and come out with some incredible output at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And you mentioned it earlier about that kind of messaging workshop piece that kind of you came to. I mean, so that was, we do those all the time, and that's facilitated by us, and kind of the level I think about having Jen there in the room was kind of hugely valuable on so many levels. And yeah, absolutely agree in terms of the overall output being better for that as a result. And I think, there's further examples of that, as mentioned earlier, where we're kind of on the website, for example, we are, looking at functional ways to make it slicker and the UX much better, but there are knock-on impacts of that in terms of SEO and things like that. So again, Jen's colleague and my colleague have been having a lot of conversations over the last kind of 3 weeks about how to find the best middle ground between that kind of achieves both our goals. And I think, we're finally there on that. But again, that has been hugely important. I think, in this particular client, I think their overall challenge is that desire to modernize and run a slicker marketing engine. So, it's so vast that we have to, be really, really collaborative.
A lot of it seems so radical, doesn't it, that we're doing these things, but I think it's just really important. I think everyone being in the same room together and hearing the same brief and being able to contribute to that strategy and bring everyone's individual specialisms is so important. So, and I can see working with both of you how that's been able to kind of feed through into all the work you're doing. So I think, yeah, fantastic that you've both been able to kind of be in those meetings and kind of kick that strategy off. That's really, really, really strong.
Yeah, and to kind of give another example as well, it will probably be something that we do, as in the Coda Wildfire relationship that we run into in the future. But to kind of go back to where I started, we do a lot of hub role PR where we're the kind of responsible for the UK implementation, but we're also the lead agency that's kind of managing the dissemination of the messaging and the news and everything like that to different agencies in different countries. And there, where you're trying to come up with a big global campaign, we all know the way things work in Germany is infinitely different to the way they work in Italy or Spain or things like that. So, the challenge is always around, and how do you find an idea that works in every country, and what do you need to do to adapt it to make it work in those different countries? And that's something that we run into on a regular basis with some of the kind of enterprise IT and MarTech clients that we work with regularly.
And I think that's another benefit to that relationship, because that global top line positioning and messaging piece, Chris, that your team have been developing up. Actually, when we get to the point at which we kind of localize that and sort of make it relevant for those regions and markets we're talking about, actually having that distance and separation from the original idea, the original branding piece, I think will only make that stronger, because when it's all done under one roof, actually, I don't know, maybe there's a tendency to kind of go, yeah, it's okay, it'll do. But actually, we're going to hold each other to account much more because we both want the quality of our own output to really shine. And I think that, that constant pushing on each other to keep delivering is going to only bring better outcomes for the client.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. So much good stuff shared so far today. Really, really great stuff. So I think we've heard so many good examples so far of why collaboration between special agencies for the same customer is so impactful and positive. I'd like to flip this around now and ask you both your thoughts on what's the cost of not working in this way? What do you think some of the kind of missed opportunities could be?
I guess flipping the answer that I just sort of summarized in that last question, I think there is a quality gap that could appear if we aren't working at this level of transparency and collaboration with each other. So I think that's probably the first one for me. I also think the cost is that information sharing and knowledge transfer about the client, and what they're thinking, what they're talking about, how their mind has changed from the original brief to, oh, actually we'd like to do it this way. That stuff, when information is shared and we're in connection all the time, that's much better than the possibility that actually that message hasn't trickled through to the other agency. So Chris mentioned earlier, we've gone off and done something in one direction, but actually the client is taking 2 steps in another direction. And that's just cost of rework as well. That's not just in terms of getting it not quite right. That's also, from their point of view, that's additional cost that they have to bear.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, going back to kind of the alternative, as in working with a large general agency, I think there you're at real danger of kind of groupthink and like just getting one tracked down a particular path because nobody's necessarily taking accountability for kind of the overall thing. They're all kind of focused on their little bits and nobody's looking at the whole. Whereas kind of when you're working at specialists, I think, as Jen says, it's kind of, holding each other to account to a certain extent and challenging each other and, bringing you back from the rabbit hole you're about to go down. That's kind of not gonna solve the problem and create more challenges. So I think, that's really important. And then I think, ultimately, nobody wins if I think, I've seen situations, I know we're not kind of dwelling on the bad stuff, but I've kind of seen situations where kind of that collaboration isn't there, where the client support agencies together and there is more kind of one-upmanship and basically a kind of long-term, a very clear one to just keep kind of showing, kind of try and trip you up and eventually kind of nudge you out of the way completely and things like that. And I think, potentially there's some short-term gains from that, but the long-term gains are non-existent. And I think, nobody wins really if that's going on. The client doesn't get the best output. You get a reputation for being difficult to work with. It's just unhealthy. And if you've had, going back to what Jen said about that commercial conversation that we had at the very beginning, I think that's really powerful and really helped in this situation set it off on completely the right foot, where we understood each other and saw the opportunity for both of us rather than, a greedy land grab where we're trying to maneuver one or the other out of the picture.
That's so true. I want to echo that as well. I think when you work with specialists, you really get the best out of those people as well, because they're enjoying what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They know their stuff. They bring a level of confidence, experience, expertise that you might not get elsewhere. And I think there's confidence and also from the agency of knowing what their specialism is. Like in translation, there's lots of different agencies that are fairly industry agnostic or type of work agnostic. We're very much open to the fact that we specialize in marketing and e-learning. There are 2 areas because we really believe in the kind of communication, and that's what we really kind of focus on as a business. When we've had other requests from something totally off that's not in those areas. It's like, yes, we can do it, but that's not where we're specialists, you know. So I think there's real confidence in knowing like what you're really, really good at and showing that to the clients. I think that's when you get the best results, because you know how to handle all the challenges. You know, you can foresee things that might go wrong or that might come up because you've been there, you've done that, and you've got that experience. I think that's very much what we've experience from looking at whether it's the website, the localization of the websites, where we shared some knowledge as well with on the ongoing marketing comms, how to kind of make the review process better, to make things easier for the local marketing teams who are signing off copy, and how to handle challenges when there's preferences that we need to capture, essentially. So I think just having that experience in that area, we know how to handle these things when they come up. And I think I've seen the exact same thing from Jen and Chris as well. So there's definitely power in working with specialists.
I'd echo that, James. I think there's a real trust, actually, you know, that when we're providing work over to you and your team, actually, it's with the specialists. They've got this, and we know that they're going to come back and deliver us quality for the client and for us. So yeah, that's definitely true. I guess I think the two key themes for me on this one are, and we've touched on it, but in the positive light in this conversation already this morning, it's kind of the cost of not working in this kind of collaborative agency setup for the client particularly is around use of resources and budget, and also it's more difficult for them to work, for them to work not doing it this way. I think that's really important. You know, as Chris said really eloquently earlier, our job as agencies is to make our clients' lives easier, and this kind of trio is a real great example of that.
Yeah, and I think we keep in mind that's our goal. That's the mission, and I think when you remember that mission, it all works really well. Because we've all worked with agencies, partnerships with the same customer where maybe they've been a bit more competitive, or they've kind of kept you at arm's length, and it's not helped. So I think that's what's been so refreshing about this relationship. So last question from myself to both of you. I think we're all in alignment that agency partnerships are a real positive. So what should agencies look for when searching for a potential partner agency to work with?
I mean, I think, you know, what's been great in this situation is, you know, we haven't, I don't think, explicitly said it on the webinar so far. It was kind of fate brought us together more so than either of us went out and kind of pursued that partnership directly. We both pitched for the same piece of business. The client gave both of us specific parts of that, and then we've been brought together, and it's been a fantastic experience in terms of making that work. And I think all of that comes down to the kind of just working with good people. That's my kind of key factor. It's kind of, you know, if you can see similar philosophies between an agency and a kind of alignment of values, and you know, you can, in the first instance, are even open to having a conversation. That, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, get lost, I'm busy, not interested, kind of thing, you know, that to have that conversation, and then just from that point onwards, that kind of, yeah, just that sense of, yes, these are people that I can work with and trust. Obviously, you know, trust builds up even further over time, but kind of you can tell it with agencies straight off the bat whether they are in it for themselves or whether they are of the way in it for the client and to do the best job that they can.
Totally agree. I think that value alignment piece is really important. And I say value in terms of kind of how you think, how you act, how you behave. I think that being brought into a situation, as opposed to, you know, Chris describing it's kind of like a brick wall, and actually we can't talk to that other agency, they don't want to know us. That's you know, that would be a massive red flag for me personally. I think the other thing is around the ways of working as agencies. And, you know, we all have our own processes and our discovery phases and how we like to get into the work, agile delivery or waterfall or whatever, you know, whatever it might be. But I think that ability to see an agency working through their process, and also an openness to kind of sharing that and talking about feedback as well, which you don't kind of get to on day one. But I think, yeah, that's definitely been something that has made me sort of relax into that partnership, because we have been able to share at that level. And And then the communication piece, which we've talked about a lot today, but I think in terms of you do get a good sense of people quite quickly in agency world, I think. And yes, okay, it's a spectrum, but I definitely believe, we've talked about the fact that you guys are both B Corps. Coda is very embedded in its sustainability credentials. We have ecology as our partner, that sort of stuff. And so even from the outside, you can see that there are similarities and things that bring us together as agencies. And that's only been amplified, I think, once we've started working together.
Completely agree. I have nothing more to add. That was a great answer. Thank you both so much.
Well, do we need to throw the spotlight onto you then for a minute, James? I believe there's another question to ask.
Go for it. Go for it.
So, I mean, for you and for Comtec specifically, how would you say a localization partner can add value to what Coda and Wildfire are doing in terms of marketing and PR? And I suppose what are the steps that you would say are needed to effectively sort of support agencies and fully understand that end client from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so much of it we've actually touched on already throughout this webinar, but I'll just kind of summarize again. The main thing is, I think, letting us in, I think, is so important. Translation agencies can often be siloed. We are often kind of seen as kind of the last step in any kind of content creation phase after so much time has been spent crafting kind of the global image or the image of the initial market, which is, more often than not in our particular work, the UK or the US. And it's so important to kind of maintain that same level of detail for all the other markets as well. We essentially, our job is to kind of take your words, take your strategy and put it into language, essentially. But bring us in earlier, and I think that's what both of you have done with us anyway, bring us in, finish a conversation about how we can make it work really well, is what is so important. There's a lot we can do from a price perspective to make things easier, as well as kind of the strategy. From a strategic point of view, we have access to market consultants all over the world who can provide information on culture. We can give insights on what might not work, red flags potentially that might come in from a translation perspective. I think bringing an agency in earlier, a translation agency in earlier, it helps just really kind of get the content originally better. There are sometimes things that won't translate in a marketing strategy and it might need a total rewrite, but if we can see that initially, we can then say, oh, actually that might not work. And that's really common in B2C in particular, where there's lots of kind of pop culture, cultural awareness stuff involved in kind of campaigns actually might mean absolutely nothing for the target markets. Also, I think just process-wise, translation is a lot more complex than I think a lot of people realize. Things like Google Translate and machine translation are out there, but in a marketing sphere, there's a lot more nuance of the culture, the language, and capturing that message that needs to go in. And there's practicalities as well. Often we'll work with local global teams as well who want to kind of feedback and review of the translations, and there's so much around being relationships with those people and making sure that we understand their preferences and understand how each individual market wants to be represented. It's a huge discovery phase, and with translation, I think, like any kind of creative content, because I always liken us to copywriting. You're never going to get it right first time, but the more you liaise with the brand, you understand them, you have collaboration, you understand, okay, they prefer talking in this way, it's an easy tweak then. So the more we're let in, I think the more prep work we do at the start, whether it's ahead of getting started or in the first few months, that's a really crucial piece. So yeah, I think, and we've been able to do that with you guys. So I think that's just the things. I think there's so many benefits from bringing a translation agency in as well on the journey.
Love that answer. Love that answer.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for giving me a little spotlight in the webinar as well. And thank you both so much for answering all my questions. It's been super insightful, and I think it's just been such a positive experience chatting with you. And I hope that's come across to our audience today, the benefits of working in this manner. We've got some time for questions. So would anyone like to pop a question in the Q&A or the chat for either myself, Jen, or Chris? Give everyone a couple of minutes to see if anyone wants to ask anything. Or equally, you might have had a similar experience you want to pop in and share with us that we can perhaps chat about. While waiting, I just want to say a big thank you to Matthew, who's put loads of nice comments in the chat as well, agreeing with a lot of what we've said. So thank you so much, Matthew, for championing us this morning. It's been greatly appreciated. You're seeing your messages pop up throughout the webinar. Cool. Oh, here we go. We've got a great question from Emma. So Emma asks, do you think there's an optimal number of organizations in a partnership? Very interesting question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Really good question.
I mean,
Go on, Chris.
I was going to say, I mean, there probably is an optimal, but I guess it also depends on the nature of the partnership and the kind of scope of work as well. I think, you know, if you've got too many agencies to collaborate with at a kind of very strategic level, it can probably slow things down and kind of make getting to an end decision more problematic. But, you know, if it's kind of tactical delivery of different things and you're all working seamlessly together, then that can be very efficient. And I guess as many different specialist areas as is needed for what you're trying to achieve can kind of work just as well. So yeah, it's a really good question, but I'm not. Do you have a better answer, Jen?
I don't think it's a better answer at all. I think that's absolutely valid. Because you're right, you know, it depends on what client's looking to achieve and how many specialists that requires to do that, you know, to get them to their goal. But I do think there is a bit of a magic number in 3. And I say that because of the amount of communications and things to think about in terms of bringing a decent amount of people together. I mean, you know, our diaries are tricky to navigate, even with us as the leaders, and you know, we come together on a regular basis, trying to get more than 3 agency partners plus a client and however many stakeholders that client together in a room. Chris, you can nod along with this because I know you've had some challenges in terms of herding the client cats. But I think, yeah, you know, I think 3 feels like a great number in terms of the relationships and the stakeholders to manage. And I think any more than that, and personally, I think the logistics of trying to organize and communicate might tip over into that's a lot.
Yeah. I think 3 is the magic number, as they say as well. But yeah, we've had experience as well where we've worked with a couple of global clients where they actually have 3 or 4 specialist agencies for different streams of work, whether it's kind of their global brand magazine or website or ongoing marketing and other things. And while we actually communicate with all of them, and because we have to, and the client communicates with them because again they have to, what we see is the agencies don't communicate with each other because there's so many different agencies in the mix. With 4 or 5 agencies, yes, we're at the bottom of the funnel, the client's at the top. We have to kind of get what we need, but I think it's that bit in the middle that does get lost. So yeah, I think 3 seems like a really sensible number, or around somewhere near there anyway.
That's a brilliant question, though.
Great question. So interesting as well to think about the more you think about it. Awesome. And thank you to Christine as well for your kind words. And Emma, thank you very much. We've had no more questions in the chat. So I think it's about time to wrap up. Jen and Chris, where can we find you guys if anyone wants to connect with you after the call?
LinkedIn is probably the best bet for me. Yeah, head over onto LinkedIn, and I'd love to make some new connections with our audience from today. It's been great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely the same. I think LinkedIn, please do connect.
Fantastic. Same with me. In the follow-up comms, we'll share with you guys our LinkedIn URLs as well as our website URLs as well. So please do get in touch with Jen, Chris, and I. We're more than happy to continue the conversation, share any best practice, and yeah, as Jen said, make some new connections. But yeah, we really appreciate you all joining us today. Thank you everyone in attendance. Huge thank you to Jen and Chris as well for doing a fantastic job and taking the time to be in attendance today. And we'll be in touch soon. Have a great day ahead, everyone.
Thanks so much, James. Thanks for hosting.
No worries. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.